10 o'clock and all's well. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for sticking through this for the week. I know it's been a lot, especially for some of you who are brand new to ESP. But that's why we spent a lot of Monday and Tuesday just going over how ESP works. Because in my opinion, you can't really do a lot, or you don't know what to do if you don't know how it works. You don't know about moving employees. Uh, what does that pertain? What actually happens when you move the employees? Where all of these values are calculated from? If you don't understand where they're coming from, how they're being calculated, then it's basically your hands are tied. So that's why in training, we would just jump in and say, okay, let's move an employee. Let's add a budgeted position. And that works good, but if you don't understand why you're doing it or what happens when you do it, then it really defeats the purpose. So that's why in training I spend a lot of time going over all the different data sets, calculations, rolling up, how things are loaded from Infinite Visions, because that's probably, I got another email yesterday asking about reloading and what happens on the reload and creating a new year. So I know it's a big source of confusion for a lot of people. So hopefully I've been able to answer a lot of questions. So yesterday I have a real world scenario I'd like to just share with everyone. Yesterday, let me find the email. Sorry, Sunlee Hughes over at Wells. It is Friday. West, I can't even say it now. West Lynn Wilsonville. Thank you. He wanted to. I should have had the email pulled up. Sorry. Okay, here we go. She wanted to know what cost to the district of one holiday for classified only, one holiday for all staff, and 1% COLA. So the good thing about ESP, it was quite easy to do. I got on the phone with her, and she had already had her new year created, but she had created it back in September, her 24-25. So you guys know, of course, but we needed to reload. I asked her if her working had changed, and she says it had not since September. So we didn't need to worry about reloading the working and copying into the model. So I knew all of her budget items here were fine. So there was no need to reload the working and copy that into the model. But obviously, the employees have changed a lot since September. So we reloaded the employees and copied them into the model. And then once we got the employees set up, we so I had to ask her a few questions. I said, do these holidays and COLAs, does that include, well, for the two holiday questions, does that include, are they already stepped and COLA, have COLAs? And she said yes. So I had to make sure we went into this scenario and added the steps and COLAs to it. And then after we did that, we recalculated, we saved a baseline in this scenario, and then we created new scenarios from it. And remember, I told everyone about the baseline that the baseline will carry forward into children's scenarios. So then in the second scenario, she was then able to go into the salary plans. Everybody was already stepped and COLA'd, but she just added one additional day just for the what was it, licensed, classified, just for the classified salary plan. Right here, 1 additional day here. And that gave everyone 1 additional day. And then she was able to go to the financials and put the baseline, because remember, the baseline did not have the 1 additional day, but now the model did. You put one in here, saved, recalculated, and then she was able to instantly tell what that 1 additional day was going to cost to the district. And then she created another. Now I told her, I said, there's multiple ways of doing things. We could save that to a spreadsheet from the financials, and then she could do the other additional days for the other plans and then save that to a spreadsheet as well. Or what she ended up doing was she wanted to create a second scenario and do the other question about the other staffing having an additional day. And then she created a third scenario and just changing the COLA. So just a real world scenario. We've had some districts actually bring ESP into the negotiations because you can so quickly change these COLAs and recalculate and know what the effect is. So that was pretty cool. Just a reminder, and I hope to remind everyone again, if you are in a test database, remember I had everyone switch, and you might or might not have, be sure that you switch back to production database. You can do it from Scenario Explorer. You go to File, Database, and then you'll change back to your PRD database. Please, you can do that after today or right now, whatever. But just make sure you do that. There's only been one time that since I've been working here 8 years that someone did not switch back, but they did do quite a bit of work in their test database, real work. And we had to find a way to go into the database and copy everything to the production, but it's a mess. So we really want to avoid that if possible. So make sure you switch back to your production after today. Okay. I just want to talk about, because we had someone yesterday ask again about how FTE is calculated. And they were getting, I knew what the problem was as soon as I got the email, because as soon as they said they changed work days, their FTE was changing. So that told me that whatever salary plan that this person was assigned to, their FTE calculation must be set to work time. And remember, work time is work days times work hours, which is the number of hours you work in a year. So remember to see that on the salary plan tab, right click, go to, I got to remember where it is, go to model. No, should have looked before we got on the phone. Oh, it's under list. That's right, under list, because it is a pull down type of property, FTE calc method. I think for everyone here on the phone call, all of these should be, excuse me, work hours, right? Which is just if one person works 1 8-hour day, they're going to be 1.0 FTE, which always seems kind of weird to me. If one person works 8 hours, they count as 1.0. In Washington, they use work time, which is excuse me, the number of hours they work in the year. So, and this is especially true for something you want to check if when you reload the employees or reload the salary plans, because sometimes we try to do our best. If a new salary plan appears, we try to align it with the other ones, but always double check. If you know a new salary plan is coming into ESP, check this calc method. And of course, check the benefit plans. Check the entire plan, of course, to make sure it looks correct. But just double check. Look for the green plus. Remember, I told you the green plus means something's different within that tree. But please confirm that your calc method is correct. Again, everyone here, I believe, should have that set to work hours. Okay. Okay, so we'll talk about the assumptions. It probably won't take the whole time. So we'll just finish early. And if there's any questions, even if you want me to look at something specific on your database or your scenario, let me know. We'll take a look. But I just want to talk about the assumptions. And the beauty of the assumptions is they carry over. Remember, we talked about when you create a new year, the assumptions and your saved grid views, that's really the only thing that carries from your previous year. That's why you always want to make sure when you create your new year scenario, you're creating it from last year's adopted, because all of your assumptions will be your latest. And for most part, when we get like a new district, we spend a lot of time going through these assumptions and setting them up. And then once they're set up year to year, not a lot is done in here except just checking the factors that we're going to talk about. Because once they're set up, you're a lot of times not having to make changes or add, unless, like I mentioned earlier, something new shows up, like the PFMLI showed up a couple of years ago. So everyone was asking how to add this. But year to year, you're going to have the same calculations. They really have not changed much. In 8 years I've been doing this, I'm sure you guys have been doing it longer. These have not really changed. The same calculations have been applied, except for this last one. So we'll talk about what you can expect to see here on the assumptions tab. And everyone's is a little bit different. These calculations might be very similar, but the benefit plans might be different, and the supplemental pay, the pay components are set up a little bit different. A lot of them are the same, but a lot of them, different districts do things, calculate things different ways. So I'm on the assumptions tab. The top line is called scenario details. This first, and whatever you select on the left, this is what you see on the right. This is that baseline that we've been talking about. When you save a baseline, you have the name, when you saved it, and then a description. So yesterday, Sun Lee, she was able to put pre extra 1 day, pre changes, whatever she put, just to remind her of what the baseline is. And each time you save a baseline, this will update. You can come in here and make changes to the name and description here on the assumptions if you want to. This target, this is a number. If you know the target that you're shooting for your general fund dollars and FTE, you can put it in here. And all this does is, if you notice up here, we track your FTE and your general fund dollars. And if you're under, and this is just expenses, if you're under whatever your target is, it'll be green. And if you're over, it will be red. That's really all it does. But some people like to use it just so they can get a quick look if they're under or over their target for both dollars and FTE. If you don't have anything in there, it's just black text, and you don't have to use that if you don't want to. This is just some informational stuff that really won't look at. A lot of this stuff is properties that, unless there's a reason, you can have ESP calculate your fund balances. You just have to give it an account mask, so it will push and pull out of an account mask. think we only have one district, and that's Westland and Wilsonville that uses this. Forecast scenarios. We didn't talk about forecast scenarios. We might have a training session later where you can create forecast scenarios. Let me just show you real quick. And if you ever feel inclined to try it, it's pretty simple. So you have a scenario and you want to forecast for 2 more years. Right click, create scenario, forecast scenario, and it opens up a new form. This is telling you that you need to recalculate because the scenario I'm starting from is not recalculated, because you generally want to be recalculated before you create new scenarios. And you can tell it the number of years. You can go up to, I believe, 9 years, 10 years out. And you can clear stepping, clear COLAs, clear inflation groups in the forecast scenarios if you want to clear them. And all it does is it copies the model of this scenario into the blue infinite visions columns in the next scenario, and then that gets copied to the model, and then the COLAs and stepping and inflation is reapplied, and then it just, it's just a straight line forecast, and it reapplies the stepping and COLAs based on the prior year stepping and COLAs. Then you'll have, for however many you create, then if you need to, you could go into each individual forecast scenario and change your factors. Then you could use crosstab, just like Jefferson County did, and get a good spreadsheet showing 2 or 3 years out. Once you get past that, because it's going to keep stepping everyone, so you're going to have a lot of people reaching max step and no one's retiring. So you might have to go into 2 or 3 years out and remove some people or change their steps. But it does work pretty good. If you have any questions about forecast or want to create forecasts, shoot me an email and I'll walk you through it. This just tells ESP where to get the employer paid deductions. All of this stuff should be set up already on everyone's district. The budget start and end date, rounding. Everybody I've known never really rounds. They round it, to the second place. We've had one district that rounded to the $100. So $130 would just be $100. But you can change the rounding if you want to. Employees, nothing you'll change here. And then grants, if you want to set up grants. Okay, so don't worry about, a lot of this is just diagnostic information. All right, so let's get to the calculations. Over here under assumptions, employee mandatory costs, yours might say fixed costs or payroll cost. These are the calculations that we saw. If you go to the employees, it's these calculations. Remember, you have these fixed cost total. You can use the tooltip to see, a little tricky, the tooltip to see individual calculations. You'll notice the same ones I see here are the same ones that I have on the assumptions tab. And you always have, if you want to see the individual columns, right click. I'm in the model. I want to look in the model. It's under the fixed cost column, submenu. And then here's each individual one. You even have a percent and a total. I'm going to click add common. Let's see what that does. That might not be set up right. Model, fixed cost, add all. So one of the overriding hints that I can give on the assumptions and with these calculations is if you do make a change, or when you do make a change, come recalculate the scenario, come over here to the employees and spot check the calculations. This is a good time when you might want to add the individual columns. Here's the PERS pickup, Social Security, workers' comp, unemployment, PF, MLI. This is when you want to make sure you didn't make a mistake on the assumptions when you're putting in the factor and making sure this isn't 40,000 instead of 4,000. So we'll start with each calculation. PERS employer contribution. You can grab this window and move it to the right. We always put the result mask so you can quickly see where the result is going. Even though that's being calculated on the employees on this line, the result rolls up to, what was that, 221 on the financials. So just because it's on the same line as their main account code, almost all of these values, except the annual rate usually, is rolling up to a different object on the financials. So we go back to the assumptions. And the way this works is you have the label, which is the label you see here in the grid, the column heading. So if you want to change the name of the column heading, if it said PERS employer contribution, you might want to shorten that to just PERS so that your columns don't get too wide. If you needed to put a description in. And then I know there's a lot of properties here because there are a lot of different ways of calculating, but you're only going to use, for the most part, just a few of these. And what this is telling it, the source amount, the account group is salary accounts. And account groups, if you look back over here on the left, under object groups, you have salary accounts, and that's telling anything that's 01 is a salary. And that, if you go back to this calculation PERS, that is the account. So it's saying anything that's in this group, salary accounts, and that's anything that's in 01. And that also will apply not just to the employees tab, but anybody that's on, or any salaries that are being calculated on the financials tab. And it's just saying sum the total wages. And then there is no qualifier for this one. And it uses a data schedule, the PERS data schedule. And if you look over here, back on the left, all the way down, you'll see your schedules. So if I look at go down here to the PERS schedule, this is the retirement status. It looks at the retirement status of each funding at their PERS, and depending on which status each employee is assigned to, they will get, in the model, they'll get this value right here, times their total wages. Now you'll notice every factor, we call these the factors, everyone has an Infinite Visions factor and a model factor. This is the value that the Infinite Visions factor is the one that's being calculated on the Infinite Visions columns. These fixed costs, the blue, right? You don't really have to keep those updated, but the purpose of the blue is for reference. This is what they're currently getting in Infinite Visions. So this one would be the current year's rates, while the model rate will be what you expect to happen next year. And just so you could put those two, if you had differences here, you could put these next to the model and see what the differences are. So already,
Tim, can you say again the Infinite Visions factors? What is the source of the factor?
They are loaded from Visions.
So that's the actual rates that as they are in Visions.
Right. We load this table
okay.
from Visions. So generally you won't change this one because it should be what they're currently getting. And then this is what you expect to happen next year.
Right. Thanks.
Yep. So then you could put these columns next to each other, either the total, or you could even drill down into, right click, infinite visions. Maybe we don't, maybe, oh, you know what? Maybe we do not break down the infinite visions into the individual columns. Thought we did, but I don't see. Okay. I'll have to ask Scott why we don't, because you know, in the model we break down each one of the fixed costs, but it looks like for the infinite visions data set we don't. I'm not sure why we wouldn't. But anyway, you can put the total there at least, and you can see what these are their fixed costs currently, and then this is the fixed costs next year. So for every calculation, every benefit plan, there is an infinite visions factor and a model factor. And again, the infinite visions factor is not super important, but the model factor is, because that's what you expect to happen next year. All of these, everything that you see, all of these calculations over here, there's also inflation factors. If you don't want to manually go in and change these, you could put like a 2%, and it would just do the math for you. If these were dollar related or cents related, you could put a dollar or cent inflation factor on there. I've seen some districts do that where they just they put an inflation factor instead of changing each one of these. But either way will work. PERS pickup. Now this one has, and you can see here, it's going to 212, but it also has a qualifier on it. This will only apply to anybody's status who is not a working retiree. So if they are a working retiree, they will not get this calculation. Everybody but working retiree status will get this calculation, the PERS pickup. And it does not use a data schedule. It uses, if you go down here, this is the infinite visions loading section. So that currently it's 0.06, but you get down here to the model calculation chain, it's also set to 0.06. And there's an A and a B. Make sure you leave the B to 1. There have been certain times where it was times this number and then times this number. So that's why there's an A and a B. So this is generally what you're really focused on as far as factors go for these calculations, the model factor A. And then the result, this probably won't change, the result of where it's going to roll up to. If you have multiple, and we get this often, multiple calculations going to one, and well, you always want clear totals checked, and it should be checked already. If you create another calculation that's going to this, you only want this check going to 212. You only want this checked on the first calculation. Because if you don't check this, it will leave the values there, and then every time you recalculate, it will just keep adding on to itself. So you always want clear totals. If there was another calculation going to 212, on the second calculation, you would not want to clear totals, or you would clear the values that come from the first calculation. We don't have many districts that have, well, we do have a couple where different calculations go into the same result. You only want to clear totals on the first calculation. And these calculations are done in the order that you see them here. And then you have just some details about what's being calculated. The include supplemental pay. This obviously includes will calculate it on supplemental pay. And then this will include it on the non-roll-up pay, where like substitutes, temporaries, any of the salaries that are being calculated on the financials tab, lump sum budgeted. So having that checked tells ESP to calculate PERS, or whatever it was called, PERS roll up, on this value, so that it will be included down here in these calculations. It will include all of the actual employees' PERS numbers, but also it's calculating it on these values as well, these lump sum salaries, because these do follow in the O1. These are salaries and they need to have payroll cost calculated on them. And you're probably wondering, well, what rate does it use, right? Because on the employees, everyone has a PERS status, or they have a workers' comp status. So but when you lump sum budget, obviously there is no status involved. You're just putting in a number. So let's go back to the assumptions. For the ones that use let me go back to this one first, PERS employee, because this one uses a schedule, the data schedule. If you click on the schedule down here, you'll notice at the bottom here, we call it the default factor. This value here is what's used on those lump sum budgeted salaries. There's a box here, check, and ESP will calculate the average value. It will take all of the, from the actual employees, and it will calculate the average factor and stick that in there if you want to use an average factor. I see most districts, they just put in usually here the largest number that, this one hasn't been updated in a while, but usually the largest number that's an actual value from the status is usually entered up here. So you can either manually enter this number, this being used on the lump sum budgeted salaries, or click calculate, and ESP will calculate an average and use that. So this is really important. I get this question quite often: what value is being used on those lump sum budgeted salaries? So please make sure, and a lot of this stuff we're talking about right now, this is stuff you'll want to go over on your New Year scenario and checking all of these factors, because everything was brought forward from I shouldn't say everything, but all the calculation structures were brought forward, and some tables like this PERS retirement status was refreshed, but some that like this number would not be refreshed. This is the same one that was used on last year's adopted. So you've got to ask yourself if you need to change that number for this year, or well, yeah, this year. If it's not using a table, it will just use this factor on that lump sum salaries. Okay, Social Security, this is my favorite one because it's just so easy. Again, on any of the salary accounts, objects, it's going to take the total wages and use 0.765, 7.65%. And again, if there was a percent symbol here in the description, you would enter it as a percent here, 7.65. When there is no percent, enter it as a decimal.
Tim, does the wage cap come in from Visions, or do we have to update that in here?
Right, very good point. Thank you for reminding me. No, you have to manually add the wage cap for Social Security. I don't know what it is this year, I should check. What this does is this will calculate security up to this point and then stop calculating, because there is a wage cap on Social Security. So that would be something you would want to Google and see what the wage cap is for 2024, 2025, and put a number in here. Does everyone understand the wage cap? Something that's fairly new, or we just added, I don't really know, but it should be included in everyone's scenario. Workers' comp, it's going to use a schedule down here, workers' comp. And when you're using a schedule, make sure that these factors are set to 1, because it will use the schedule and then it's going to multiply it times 1 times 1. So if you need to modify the schedule, you could change it here by this calculation chain if you wanted to. But generally, you're going to go to the schedule, and this gets updated from Visions as well. You would go to the schedule and just change the percent here. This one is using a average factor. And if you want to see what that average factor is, you have to go back to the calculation, scroll down, and then at the bottom in the calculation details, there's the average factor. So this is the factor that is being used on the lump summed salaries. I told Scott we should show that average factor here, and maybe we will at one point, but you have to switch back to the calculation and scroll to the bottom to see the average factor.
Tim, I just put the social security information in the chat from the information we got from
Oh, thank you.
Tyler.
Okay. 168,000. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. 100. Okay, so you would enter 100 back to Social Security. So everyone should enter 168,800 for the wage cap. So it's going to calculate Social Security up to 168,800, and then anything over that Social Security is not being calculated on. That's the purpose of the total wages cap. And remember, that's not just their annual rate, but that's any supplemental pay that has payroll tax calculated on it. And it's in the chat if anybody wants to see that. Thank you, Kim. Unemployment. It's usually a fairly small number. It's just like Social Security. You're just going to generally change this number here, the factor. And then, and double check that, I don't think they change very often, but double check that your result mask, your result object is still the same. We have a result map because in Washington, they have different account codes. If you're classified, it goes to a result, goes into a different account code. If you're licensed, it goes into a different account code. So if you ever needed to split it out, rather than just lump it all into one object, you could. Luckily, Infinite Visions, you don't. But it does work pretty well if you need to split it to different account codes, the result. And then the last one, okay, so here's a good example. I don't know why, but it's 0.00 or 0.4% times 0.6%. Is that right? To get PFMLI. I'm not sure why I don't remember why there's two calculations. But this is an example of where you have the chain, you need two different numbers. Does anybody know offhand why? Okay, well, anyway.
I would actually assume that it's supposed to be 0.004 and 1.0.
Right. Well, we copied this from an actual district. I don't know. I'll have to look into that. But if you, maybe I changed it one day just to show that you can chain these together. I don't know, but I will, I'll look into that. Everyone, make sure you're checking these factors. And the good thing is once you check them for the new year scenario, you know, all your subsequent, this is why you want to do all of this in your fiscal base scenario. That's the purpose of this first one. So that all subsequent, because if you create a bunch of scenarios and you hadn't changed the PFMLI, you would have to go into each individual one and change it. If you're not using them, you know, you could skip it, but then, you know, you don't want to start getting, because if you start, you know, then each scenario becomes different and you got to remember what each scenario has, and you would hate to, you know, realize you didn't change a factor in one of your scenarios. We talked about object groups. I want to show you guys how to do an inflation group. So I'm going to go to the object groups. Excuse me, someone's trying to chat with me. If you select the object groups and you can click the green plus or right click add object group. And why am I getting an error? I just did this with the pre. Let me try this again. Hang on. Okay, you guys should be able to try it. I should have tried this before. All right, hang on a second. Let me try this in a non-beta. Okay, well, we'll skip this for now and I'll come back to it while I get the other version loaded. Some of you probably already have a third group here called utilities, a third object group. And all it does is you give it a mask, or you can manually pick which objects to put in the group. And then you go over here to this one doesn't have it. There's an inflation factor. You can say take a lot of it's used for utilities, like 320 through 325. I'll see if I can find a district that has one. And you can say, okay, take all of the utilities, take the values from the working, and just add 3%. So it does the math for you for those, so that you don't have to manually go in and make those changes on the financials. It just automatically does it. Just a second, guys. Let me see if I can pull one up real quick. Almost every district is using it. Pay no attention to me. Okay. I'll come back to this. Just
You can use Lincoln County. I've got it in there.
okay. Thank you. I'm trying to pull it up in the pre-release because I know it works fine in the pre-release. County. Okay, I'm loading Park Rose. I don't think I can connect to Lincoln County right now. I'm not connected to the VPN, but I'll come back to that in just a minute. So let's talk about benefit plans. There's two types. We've talked about in ESP where numbers originate. Either we calculate or we pull in values from Infinite Visions. And the same goes for benefit plans and the pay components when we get to that. Because administrators, because their plans are usually all over the place, they are negotiated. So we pull in the actual deductions from Infinite Visions to assign to their benefit plans. And we do this, if you select administrators over here on the right, I think everyone's is the same way. You have this deduction under Infinite Visions deductions. We tell it to look for deduction type 23. And this is a pull down menu, and this should look maybe somewhat familiar. These are all of the deduction types that come from payroll. And 23 is the ID we look for. And these binoculars are really cool, because if you click on the binoculars, it goes into Visions and looks at that deduction type. And it brings back everyone and the amount that they're getting for their medical. This brings back everybody, not just the administrators, but you should be able to find the administrators in here and see their value. And you can see the deduction type here. That's what ESP is keying on. For administrators, if you go to the employees, oh, did I create something? So I made a change, and it's asking me if I want to apply that change before I switch tabs, and I don't want to, so I click no. So if we look at administrators benefits, so Ryan's getting 31. If you right click IV details, we should see. So here's all of his pay information. And this one, and this one are the insurance. So if we right click, select that, those three columns, 31,586, 31,586. So for administrators, we pull in their vision, medical, and dental, and just sum it into their benefits. And if you scroll to the right, you can see that there's the 23. I don't know if that heading is correct, but that's how you can know the ones that are marked as insurance. So that's where, for your administrators, when you're pulling in the actuals, that's where the value comes from. To give them for next year, since we're not really, let me just refresh. Since we're not calculating the value, you have to give them an inflation factor. So you come to the factors, inflation, you could put a 2, 3, 4% on here, and it will just inflate their values for next year, or for the budget, which is for next year. And then this is what tells ESP to use the actual deduction amount that you were loading from this deductions. If you need to cap it, you know, maybe it's 25, even though they're getting 28,000 or 35,000. That is a lot, isn't it? 35,000. 31,000. If you need to cap it, there is a cap here. You cap everybody at whatever, 28,000, 25,000. And then regardless, if they go over, it will still cap it at whatever you put in for the cap. If you want to, and this is going to be for the pay components, it gets a little tricky because as you get new employees showing up, if you want to bring them into the model, you can check this box, which is update model on next reload. So if their values have changed in visions and you want to update just the benefit dollars, you check this box, and all of these other calculations that use actuals have this box. And it says, when you reload the employees, copy the values over just for this benefit plan. Now, if you check this box and save it, you'll then have to go to the employees, tools, employees, reload employees. And remember, reloading only brings them into the blue columns. However, if that update model on reload is checked, just the dollars, the benefit dollars will copy into the model. Now, if you check this, copy to model and recalculate, it copies everything. So you don't really need to worry about checking the individual benefit plans to bring the dollars in. This will bring everybody in. But at some point, you're going to want to quit copying over your entire data set. So then if you want to just update everyone's medical benefits for the administrators, just use this checkbox and then reload. It will reload everybody into the blue columns and just copy the new benefits over for the administrators. And we're going to see that on some of these other pay components that use actuals as well. They have click on longevity because it uses, well, no, actually it uses a schedule, but coaching, it has a update model on next reload because it uses actual dollars from the coaching supplemental pay from visions. So now it's doing a search for any of the supplemental pay type that have the word coach in them. It might take a while. So then here's all of the coaches. The problem with coaching is sometimes you have like a math coach. So sometimes just using a wildcard like the word coach might not work. You can always have a list here, and whatever you put in here, it will filter this list. This is all of those coaches that we saw. So you might want, if you need to, you could just go in and say, I want this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. And that way you could skip the math coach. And then you would get rid of this coach and you would have to reload the employees, copy to model, and then it would update with the correct employees and values with whatever new you put here. We'll come back to this in just a minute. But I just wanted to remind everybody that a lot of these calculations use actual values. So you got to be aware of the update model on next reload. If you're doing mass copies, it's fine. But if you want to reload just certain dollars for certain benefit plans or supplemental, you need to use this update model on next reload. Okay, so Next one. Any questions about the administrators? Really, all you're going to probably need to do is put an inflation factor on here. And it will take their existing dollars and just inflate it by whatever percent or dollars you put on there. Okay, certified. The rest of these use a qualification level. And it's usually based on FTE. And it goes top to bottom. So this is just anybody that's any certified district employees on this plan. It's 0.5 or over will get this model monthly benefit, 1530. Prorated by FTE. So if they're 0.75, they'll get 0.75 of 1530. These participation factors, because some districts have found that even though a lot of people qualify, they don't take the money because maybe they're on a spouse's plan. So you could artificially, this one, the benefit factor or the participation factor, you could lower this value. A lot of districts keep it at 100 because there's usually, well, you're budgeting some extra dollars, a cushion. But this is what the participation factor is for. I think over at Jefferson County, they use 91% here. But all you're concerned with mostly is this model monthly benefit, what you expect them to get per month next year. Classified, it's the same. For this one, 0.5. Some districts have like 0.75, you get a certain rate, then 0.5, you have a certain rate. You have 4 different levels of FTE. I don't think anybody's using level 3 or 4. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, this one does have 2 levels because it was collapsed. So 0.75 and higher gets 1575. Between 0.5 and 0.75, they get 1,000 per month. So all you should be changing is the model monthly amounts. And make sure, you know, that these qualification levels still exist and still pertain to your district. There's a no benefits, this is no benefits, and it's used for because remember, these benefit plans, you go to the salary plan tab. I don't know, see, you make a change, and if you don't save it, it wants you to save it. Remember, over here on the salary plan tab, you have the benefit plan. And you assign, if you notice, these are the same benefit plans that I have on the assumptions tab. You assign benefit plans to salary plans. And then this is how the benefit plans gets to each individual employee. So an employee, really, they're assigned to a salary plan and they're assigned to a benefit plan. You can override which benefit plan people are assigned to. You can show the benefit plan column and then change their benefit plan. Don't see that very often though. And of course, for some of these plans, travel allowance, cell phone allowance, no benefits. That's why there's a no benefits. Because a lot of these, some of these benefit plans, salary plans don't need a benefit plan. I'm going to just refresh. And then this district also had a separate benefit plan for superintendent, and it used actuals as well. And all of these benefit plans, they roll up to 240 on the financials tab. This one, budgeted position and vacancy default monthly. If you create a budgeted position for an administrator or superintendent, it will use whatever value you put in here. you can manually enter a value when you're creating it. But if you just want a default factor, you can put a value in here. You create a budgeted position, and this value will automatically be there. Any questions about the benefit plans? All right, let's just take a quick 2-minute break, and then we will get back to it. We'll go over the pay components next. I'm back if anybody has any questions. I don't know about you guys, but we're expecting heavy snow tomorrow, 6 inches, which is a lot for this area. Good thing football's on. I can just stay in and watch football. My Texans, I'm a Houston Texans fan, so if you guys could root for the Texans tomorrow, I'd appreciate it. All right, we'll talk about pay components. This is supplemental pay. Some districts have a few, some have a lot. It just depends on if you want ESP to calculate it, or you could just manually lump sum budget it on the financials. And again, usually it's either going to be actuals that are brought in, or you use the factors and qualifiers over here on the right to calculate it. For this one, and this one's a little bit complicated, longevity. And again, in the Infinite Visions loading, the binoculars are really cool. And I suggest using the binoculars because it will tell you the real dollars that are being calculated in Visions. And hopefully yours, what you're calculating on the assumption on the employees tab should follow fairly closely. So here's all of the longevity. This is something that we've added, and I don't know if I like it, but we're summarizing, we're grouping and then summarizing each individual one. Not sure I like that way the way it looks. This is something new. But anyway, you can see that the longevity, and I definitely recommend, because now there's one called longevity correction in here, along with longevity pay. But this pay component is not using the actuals. It is using a qualifier. It's saying anybody on salary plan 8, which is, I believe, licensed, classified. So anybody, they have to be on this salary plan. And there are many different ways of setting qualifiers. You can, if you use the pull down here, pretty much any status or value, you can use certain objects, certain centers, their age, their hire date. There's a plethora of possibilities for using a qualifier. Most of the time it's like salary plan or their work time. But this is saying anybody on plan 8. Let me refresh. I lost it. So the first thing ESP does is it goes through the employees and it looks for anybody on plan 8. And then it's also, after that, using a data schedule. And remember, anytime you see data schedule, now you can click on it here and watch what the grid does. It will show you the table. It's the same table that's over here under classified longevity pay. But it doesn't give you all of the other information. It just gives you the table. But that might be okay right now because that's all I want to look at. And actually, it's not what I want to look at. I want to look at the table itself. It gives you a lot more information about the table. And what this table does is telling me, it's looking at district service. And it is a threshold value. So notice you got 15, 20, 25, 30. And then this table was created in ESP. This is not something that gets loaded from Visions. This was created at some point in this district's history, and it's just carried forward each new year. Because you can right click, create new schedule over here if you need to. But threshold means anything going up to or from 15 to 20. Anything below 15 is 0, obviously. But once you hit the threshold of 15 years, district service, 15 years, it's going to take 0.35. And we go back to the pay component. And it's going to multiply it. I know it's a little confusing here, but it's going to multiply it times their work time. So we can go over here. Let me reset my columns. Pause that for a second. Let me show you how to add the pay component columns. So in between, we talked about annual rate and total wages. So in between this annual rate and total wages are that supplemental pay that we're talking about. So if I usually like to add the supplemental pay in between these, just so it keeps flowing left to right in the grid. So I'm going to right click here. I want to look in the model. And if you go to the model and you go to this pay component submenu, here are those pay components that I have on the assumptions page. So I'm just going to add the longevity for right now. And I would expect to see dollars in the object 0112 classified, because those are the ones that are on plan 8. So here's classified. Here's the longevity pay component. Now, if I want to check the math, so it was based on district years of service. So I'm going to add each employee's district years of service. Now, anything that's like their birth date or their years of service, hire date, that's not in a data set. That's if you go down further, it's under the employee. It's not really part of the model, so to speak. It's separate. So go to model and I find district service. Some columns add right away because they're actually loaded in the background. Some of these ones that aren't used very often, they have to go back to the database, get the data, and then reload it into the grid. So that's why some are fast, some take a few seconds to load. So I remember anything up to 15 years, they do not get longevity. So these guys below 15, that's good. I don't see any dollars here. Trying to find one at 18 years. So it was, I believe it was 35. So it's times, remember, it's times their work time. So first of all, they have to qualify, they have to be on plan 8. And then they have to reach the threshold of 15. So 18 qualifies as well. And it's times their work time. If you right click, go to the model, there is a work time column. And that one popped up right away because it was already there. So it's 8 times 260 is 2,080 hours. And was it 35 cents? I think 0.35, $728. So that one's a little complicated. It's using the qualifier, then it's using a table. A table also works as a qualifier for a lot of these, because if they don't match one of these, then they would not, it wouldn't even calculate anything for them. So if you need help setting up any of these, a lot of these are already set up. All you would really need to be worried about here is make sure this is still going to apply for next year, and then change these rates if they needed to be changed. And again, they have an inflation factor if you just want to put an inflation factor on there. And then that rolls up into 118. Questions about that? Coaching, I believe it uses actuals. We talked about coaching already, but anything that had coach in it. And notice that longevity didn't have that, so that stayed on the same line as their main funding, even though it rolls up to a different object on the financials. But some of them you want to show them as separate. So we have a keep separate for like coaching, keep funding separate. So if you look back on the employees, you should see a different object. I think it was, let me look, 131. And there could be not just coaching, but there could be other things in 131. But then I can right click, model, pay component, coaching. So as you're going through these, it's good to do what I'm doing, show the district service, years of service, and just double check the math, because it's real easy to put in an extra decimal or an extra zero somewhere. And you don't want it to be too far down the road before you catch that. So here's the coaching, and you can always do the right click, infinite vision details. Back real quick, the district years of service, these don't really mean anything on the supplemental, but we do increase it by 1 year because next year it's going to be 1 more year. We've had a lot of districts where if they don't maintain the district years of service, and for some districts it's calculated on their hire date. So if Envision's the hire date's not being set right, or wherever this value comes from isn't being set right in Envision's, it's going to throw all your numbers off. So that's another reason to verify everything. Because a lot of times these numbers, nobody cares about them in Envision's, so they don't get updated. And then when you want to use them in ESP, they're incorrect. So double check all of these. So remember this window, I use it all the time, right? I had opened that Infinite Visions window, and to get back, any window that you have open is under this window menu. And then there's the one I'm looking for Virginia Vaughn. And here's her coaching supplemental. Actually, she has 2 of them. So I'd have to see why. Oh, well, the names are different because we changed these names. We sterilized these names because it's a test database.
It's because one is the regular stipend, the other one is for the playoffs.
Oh, okay. So whatever number you see here, you should see here. Let me look at. And remember, the red and blue means they have another funding. So Zach, he probably is a teacher and a coach. Or maybe classified. PE coach probably. So here's his coaching. 6178, 6178. So this, this goes back to if new coaches get hired, you're going to want to reload the employees. And you have the copy to model. If a new coach shows up, you can always, they'll show up over here, grayed out, because they'll be in the actuals. You can right click and copy just that coach into the model. So again, a lot of districts have just a few, some have a lot of pay components. You can have up to 20 pay components. So go through each one, make sure everything still qualifies as being that you want to calculate on for next year, and then check the rates and make sure it's being calculated correctly. Extra duty is just like the coaching we just talked about.
Tim, on the pay components, what if we want to delete? We don't want to use them anymore.
Well, there's 2 ways. If you want to completely get rid of it, you can select it and click the red X to delete it. Or if you think you might use it later, or you want to change it to a different one, you can go in here and just change things around. You can just inactivate, uncheck the active box right there. And
then how about setting up a new one?
You just click you select, the best way to do it in ESP is find one that's kind of similar. And this goes for these calculations up here. Select one and check the green plus here. Or you can right click and click add pay component.
Got it, thanks.
Yep. Add will add it to the bottom. Insert will put it next to the one that you select, because these are done top to bottom as well. So if you had 2 pay components feeding the same object, you might want to put them next to each other.
How can you change the order of them if they aren't right?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because I saw you could do that on the fixed costs, but you can't do it the same way here.
Right. I don't know. That's a good question, Kim. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that. You might not be able to.
Okay,
I don't know. I'll ask Scott about that.
thank you.
Because yeah, I think you're right. I think you can move these. You select it and use the up and down.
Yeah, I just did it online on the fixed costs.
Right. But I don't see that here.
Yeah, it's not active there.
Right. Okay. I don't, that's the thing. You guys come up with these questions we never think about. And then this administrator LTD, it looks like it's using the actuals as well, and it's being based on, see, I don't even know what this one does. But what I wanted to show about this one is marked as a benefit. So payroll costs will not be calculated on any pay component that's marked as a benefit. There's 3 types. Well, I guess 4 really, but benefits, which does not have payroll costs associated with it. Salary will mean that it's included in their part of their salary. So it will roll up to whatever their 0111 salary. It'll still be separate on the employees tab, but it will roll up into whatever their parent funding is. If they're a teacher, it will roll into their teacher account code. Supplemental means it's going to roll into a different object code. If you have supplemental pay selected, you have to use this default account mask. It will roll into that. If it's set to salary, you don't need the result mask because it's just going to follow their salary. So you guys go through all of these part of your new year. And the good thing is once you get them set up, usually year to year, not a lot of big changes. And if you need any help getting them set up, let me know. Any questions about the assumptions? I know there's a lot of properties here. Most of them aren't used often, but every property that you see has come from someone needing a certain way to do things. So we've added the property to allow for that. But it does add to some confusion, complexity. Any questions about ESP at all or anything else you want to ask me? I think we've pretty much hit every piece of ESP. Feel free to email me later with questions. I'll be posting the videos up to YouTube and I'll send the link out either later today or probably Tuesday. It takes a while to upload all the videos. Couple of hours actually, and these videos are quite large files. Well, okay, if no one has any questions, then we'll go ahead and wrap it up and make sure that you return to your production database. I would go ahead and do that now, unless you want to stay in your test and play around, but just please remember to go back to production. And okay, if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me. My headset's about to die anyway, so it's good timing. All right, thanks everyone, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.